The Lanarkshire Yeomanry has a long and proud history and featured in all the military campaigns of the 20th century, first in the Boer War and then in the Great War of 1914-18, when they saw action in the deserts of the Middle East, at Gallipoli, the Dardanelles, and latterly on the Western Front, where Sergeant Thomas Caldwell from Carluke was to win the Victoria Cross. After the war, the so-called war to end all wars, little did the men who were to join the territorial Lanarkshire Yeomanry for the fellowship and recreation that summer camps in the borders would bring, realise that within a few years they would once again be on the field of battle. Following the outbreak of the Second World War, the regiment reformed into two regiments of field artillery, the 155 and the 156. The 156 were to see action in Sicily, in the wintry and muddy conditions of the Apennine Mountains of mainland Italy, and on the killing beaches of Anzio. And the 155 were to fare even worse when, after the fateful Malayan campaign of 1941-42, where they were to bring great credit upon themselves, they were taken prisoner by a ruthless enemy. And in the years to follow, whether on the Death Railway or in the bowels of the evil Kinkasaki copper mine, they were to suffer and die in horrendous conditions. That some survived is in itself a miracle, and they, and the others who did not return, should never be forgotten.
Well, I can't convey enough thanks to the ladies and the organisers who made this such a special day for us. Isn't that, Tom?
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
We'll come to the next one, won't we?
Yeah.
Well, God bless you all. Thank you ever so much. Thank you. Memory goes back over the years and think all about the good fun I had in the Yeomanry in Lanark, you know. I mean, good fun, you know. I always remember the little people in Lanark, not the old broken down houses, made canteens for us. And you got a slice of toast with a cup of tea for a penny. You know, and used to give us strawberry tarts. We got many strawberries. They had so many strawberries and tomatoes. They're coming out with ears, you know that? Coming out with ears. I can remember all those nice things, you know. Oh, I was proud of the Lanarkshire Yeomanry, of course I was. We fought well, you know. We weren't a big group, you know. I mean, we were limited in the vision. We were in a small portion of it, our guns. I mean, we didn't have the... see, we had no chance. The Japanese had aircraft and tanks. We had nothing like that. We were nothing like that. But I was so happy to see Tam there, my pal. See, Tam and I we went to India with the regiment. And we got split up. Tam went up to northern India, and I was shot as a singer for the other B batteries. And I had to go as a singer to Malaya. That's how I got parted. But I never met until 65 years afterwards. And it was something in the newspapers and saying, you know, on the television, I was at the radio. And his son said, look, here's a bloke here called Andy Coogan. Running the Ibrox and says, that's my mate, 65 years afterwards. Can you say? So he came to Carnoustie, and the first thing, coming up the street, said, Christ, I thought you were dead. I thought you were dead. Anyway, that's his story.
It meant a lot to me. It did so. I mean, when I went into the Lanarkshire Yeomanry and met up with all the other boys, I was really happy. I was. Why should it be remembered? Well, all I can say is a damn long while before they did remember us. When it comes to this today, I think this should have happened to us years ago. So I would like to see this being kept on.
The purpose of the gathering at New Mains was simply this opportunity to bring together the survivors, people like Andy Coogan and the others, who some of them hadn't met, as we'd said, for some time, to allow them this opportunity just to meet with men who they had gone through the rigours of war with, but also for their families, to give their families a sense of the value that was still there about their relatives. That was the real reason for it. It was a commemoration, if you like, but it was more so for the families themselves.
My father joined the Lanarkshire Yeomanry as a volunteer before World War II started. He was then involved in the Million campaign, became a prisoner of war of the Japanese and survived, fortunately, unlike a lot of his friends. After the war, my father wrote about his experiences and tried to find a publisher for the book. Nobody was interested because they said that there were too many war stories already. So he tore the book up and threw it in the fire. And then some years later, he bought a second-hand typewriter and wrote it again and put it away in the cupboard. Nobody knew about it until the house was burgled and they were on holiday and the police came for me, and I found the manuscript all over the floor, and I was fascinated by the story, and we encouraged him to look for a publisher again, and the very first publisher accepted it for publication.
I first became involved with the Yeomanry just last year when I had been given a book by a friend. He knew I had an interest in the Second World War, but for no other reason that he just said, you might be interested in this book, it's about a local man, written by a local man. And now I took it out of politeness to him, having no particular interest or knowledge of the war in the Far East, took it home that night with the intention of returning it to him in a few weeks' time, politely saying that I hadn't had the time to read it. But became fascinated when I opened the first couple of pages and quite literally couldn't put it down. You know, read it through the night and was fascinated by the story of this local man, John McEwen. Now, as a result, I thought, if this man is still alive, I'd like to speak to him. And just by a process of elimination, I managed to find him. A fascinating man, a gentle man, as I found, but a man who had been through the mill. A man who only in later years, only in recent years, had actually found some degree of peace and calm after the tragedy and the horror that he had been subjected to. Sadly, John McEwen died in February in 2008, and really it's because of him that all this work has actually been done. And it's because of him largely that there's an impetus to push on this memory of the men, of the yeomanry. It's important, as I say, if not just to recognise the tragedy of war, but particularly to recognise the sacrifice made by local men.
As I was growing up, I knew nothing about what had happened to my father, only from my mother that he was 5.5 stones when he came back, and you know, things were really dreadful for them. It was only when I read the book that I discovered his dreadful experiences. It's important to keep the memory of the men alive because nobody really realises how hard it was for them. They became prisoners of war. They came back and the attitude was that they had been cowards because they had surrendered, and it wasn't their choice to surrender. And after the surrender they were treated very, very badly and basically came back wrecks. And to face this attitude that they were cowards really destroyed them for a long time. And I think that's why it's important that we remember these men. I think my father would be absolutely delighted because he always said that everybody knows about the Cameronians and about the Gordons. Nobody knows about the Yeomanry, and it's such a shame that it is the local regiment and nobody knows about them apart from the families.